What's going on, everybody? Cleepus Tech here, coming back at you with another video. In this video, we're going to be doing a quick comparison between the Nokia G400 5G and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2021. Now before we go any further, as always, I do want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, and if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But with that being said, let's get into it. So with the Nokia G400 5G, we're getting a 6.58-inch 120Hz IPS LCD display with a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 401, and an aspect ratio of 20:9. With the Moto G Stylus 5G, we're getting a 6.8-inch IPS LCD display, and this phone also has a 1080p resolution, a PPI of 386, and an aspect ratio of 20:9 as well. So in almost every way, these displays are pretty much the same, but that being said, at 6.8 inches versus 6.58, the Moto G Stylus 5G is a little bit larger, and this tends to be a good thing when you're consuming a lot of content. On the other hand, with the Nokia G400 5G, this phone does have a 120Hz refresh rate versus a standard 60Hz, and this is going to make the movement on the screen a little bit faster and smoother. So if you're doing something like watching videos, for example, things are going to look slightly better on the Nokia G400 5G, and the phone overall is going to feel a bit more premium to use. So overall, honestly, if you want a mid-range 5G phone with a good display, you're really not going to go wrong with either phone. It just comes down to personal preference. I would personally choose a slightly larger display over a higher refresh rate, but on the other hand, again, that's really up to personal preference, and you're really not going to go wrong with either. Now for storage, the Nokia G400 5G is getting 64GB of internal storage with microSD card expansion, and the Moto G Stylus 5G has 128GB with microSD card expansion as well. So in general, on one hand, with the Nokia G400 5G, 64GB really isn't bad, and for the average user, as long as you're mindful of what you're putting on your phone, and you make sure to use the microSD card expansion whenever you can, you will at least get by here. But if you're more of a power user, if you have a bunch of apps and stuff like that, then keep in mind, the Moto G Stylus 5G does have double the storage here with 128GB. And if you have a lot of things on your phone, this in general is going to be a lot better. Now for security features, both phones do have Face Unlock, and they both have fingerprint scanners as well. With the Nokia G400, it's right here on the power key, definitely a great spot for it. And with the Moto G Stylus 5G, it's right here on the back. But starting with the Nokia G400 5G, let's go ahead and give them a try. There we go, one more time. And there we go. And now for the Moto G Stylus 5G. There we go, one more time. And there we go. So as you can see, both fingerprint scanners worked real well, no issues at all. And again, remember, both phones do have Face Unlock too, so if you want to use that instead, you always can. Now for the cameras, with the Nokia G400 5G, we got a water drop notch for the front-facing camera. This camera is 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a triple camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. With the Moto G Stylus 5G, we got a nice looking hole punch design for the front-facing camera. This camera is also 16 megapixels. Then on the back, we got a quad camera setup with a 48 megapixel main camera, an 8 megapixel ultra-wide camera, a 5 megapixel macro camera, and a 2 megapixel depth sensing camera. So in general, as far as features go, both phones do have pretty good camera setups, but of course keep in mind, the Nokia G400 5G does not have a macro camera, whereas again, the Moto G Stylus 5G does. So if you do want to get those close-up detailed images, if that's really an important feature for you, definitely keep this in mind. Other than that though, I feel like the cameras are pretty much interchangeable. Both of them are pretty decent for what they are. Honestly, neither is really particularly impressive, but if you're just taking a few photos every now and then, maybe for social media for example, these phones are really all you're going to need for that. But in general, again, between the two, it really comes down to whether or not you actually want a macro camera, otherwise it's pretty much going to be the same. Now when it comes to RAM and processor, these phones are actually exactly the same, both of them getting 4GB of RAM with the Qualcomm Snapdragon 480 5G processor. So in general, as far as performance goes, of course, seeing that they do have the same processor, you're not really going to see a significant difference between the two. And that being said, for mid-range phones, at least by today's standards, they're really not that impressive. I mean, there are plenty of phones around the same price range, like for example, the Samsung Galaxy A23 5G. Well, maybe that's a little bit more expensive than the Moto G Stylus 5G 2021, but it retails for about the same as the Nokia G400 5G, and that phone is so much faster than these two. So in general, if you do want a phone in this price range that has the best performance, then neither of these phones is really going to be the best option. But that being said, if you just need a solid mid-range 5G phone that's going to get the job done for more basic daily activities like web browsing, social media, stuff like that, either phone is going to be perfectly fine. Now I did run Geekbench 5 benchmark tests on both of these phones, and here are the scores I got. So again, pretty much the same kind of thing here, but I do recommend running this test on your current phone and comparing your results to these, and that's going to give you a better idea of whether or not these these phones are going to be a performance upgrade for you. Now when it comes to the battery, these phones are actually pretty similar there too, both having a 5000 mAh battery, with the Nokia G400 5G supporting 20W fast charging and the Moto G Stylus 5G supporting 10W fast charging. So in general, the difference in fast charging might matter to some people, but even with the Moto G Stylus 5G, this phone does charge up decently fast. But of course, if you want the best charging speeds, then the Nokia G400 5G will be a little bit better. But with 5000 mAh batteries, both phones have great battery life and longevity. So if battery life is really a priority for you, either phone is going to be a great option. Some other things to keep in mind here is that first of all, when it comes to software, the Nokia G400 5G does have Android 12. Now I'm not 100% sure when or if it is going to get Android 13, but I imagine it probably will at some point. But with the Moto G Stylus 5G 2021, this phone does have Android 11, so regardless of whether or not the Nokia G400 5G does get the update to Android 13, between the two, it is still going to have the better software. In addition to this, the Nokia G400 5G also does have NFC, so if you like to make contactless mobile payments using tap and pay, the Nokia G400 5G will have an advantage because unfortunately, the Moto G Stylus 5G 2021 doesn't have NFC. In addition to this, of course, as the name of the phone suggests, the Moto G Stylus 5G does have a stylus, whereas the Nokia G400 5G doesn't. So if you do want a phone with a stylus, you're probably going to want the Moto G Stylus 5G. And honestly, in this price range, this is really one of the only phones with this feature. But in conclusion, which of these phones is better? In general, it's honestly pretty close because in a lot of ways, these phones are actually almost the same. But that being said, I would personally go with the Nokia G400 5G because this is a newer device with a newer software, and it does have NFC for tap and pay, which I personally use all the time. But that being said, if you want a slightly larger display, a slightly better camera setup, and you want a stylus, the Moto G Stylus 5G really won't be a bad option either. And in general, if you're looking for a solid mid-range 5G phone for basic activities like web browsing, social media, watching videos, and maybe some mobile gaming here and there, then honestly, either phone will be a perfectly fine option. But this concludes my comparison between the Nokia G400 5G and the Motorola Moto G Stylus 5G 2021. Again, if you want to learn more about either phone individually, I will be linking to several other videos about each of them in the description, as well as some information about pricing, availability, and some of my favorite smartphone accessories. But that's it for this video. If you enjoyed it and found it useful, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Don't forget to follow Kalipis Tech on Twitter and Instagram. And as always, I will see you in the next video.